Hey there, truckers. Thanks for circling back. Happy New Year. 2022 has just started. It is today, Wednesday, January 5th. So I did another video, my last video, which has 18 views so far. I'm going to talk a little bit about media and how the role of media, what is media? What's going on with enrollment, subscriptions, stuff like this. And why did I say truckers? Why did I say hello, truckers? Well, we're talking on YouTube a lot about how, say, Joe Rogan and a lot of these talk show hosts have a huge audience because they have an audio only audience, partly. They have drivers, they have people in their cars, they have people that, even if they're not in their cars, they have work to do, right? This is a point being made in an interview I just saw. And I want to get back to my idea, the general systems theory idea, GST, of the personal workspace. What is your work bubble? Now, there is something in Bucky Fuller like this too, about how we're all kind of a privacy bubble, because you can't see exactly what other people see, right? I say that to say lots of philosophy goes here. But there's some bubble of your awareness that we could call your personal workspace. And maybe you're like a dishwasher. I was a dishwasher in, industrial sized kitchen with the conveyor belts and all that, and the super high pressure spraying and all what you've got in a big kitchen. That's like, you got to pay attention, right? Because kitchens are the proverbial place where if you don't pay attention, you could lose a finger or something, and that's gross, right? Because they're trying to make food here. And if somebody cuts off their own finger, right, it's like gross. So, and you feel embarrassed, and then, all the pain and all that stuff, right? So you want to be aware and alive. Same with driving. Same with driving. But we find we can divide our attention and we think safely. Now, a lot of people very much miscalculate this and they distribute their attention too much to something. Like they do try to watch a movie while driving or something stupid like that, right? But we're talking about attention because that's also from the point of view of programmers. And I mean people who do TV programming, people who need to fill time and space with content. They measure their success in terms of, is anyone paying any attention, or does this have the potential to change attention patterns? In other words, does anybody see this or care about it? Because then if a lot of people do, the typical pattern, and say, we'll call it a capitalist pattern, is to then turn around to advertisers and say, look, a lot of people are staring, eyeballing these particular videos, this particular page, this particular radio station. Wouldn't you like them to learn about your products or your services? Or, and this is more subtle and I think underappreciated, you can advertise your own brand as you support this. Like you're behind this. This is something you can get behind. And so it's your brand that you're advertising as being awake and aware enough to be like behind this really trendy thing, whatever it is, right? And it could just be a voice in the wilderness here. So now I should launch into a promo or a commercial. However, this has not been my model. So these are not monetized. And I'm not really here to discuss exactly what's going on with this channel at this point, but to point out that we have these new general technology patterns that relate to the idea. I want to circle back to personal workspace. And the reason I called people truckers when I started out, it's not anyone, you don't call people truckers, you greet truckers. Hello, truckers. We're all long haul truckers in our own private cab, which is whatever's out your window, so to speak, right? And there's the literal trucker here. There's the driver, too. There's just the person on the freeway. So I'm trying to make a podcast that you can listen to, but of course, if you're watching, what I'm flickering through in background to my monologue is what I call high school of tomorrow content. And the cutting edge here, where we're different in terms of our content, you could say, is we look at the world in light of the fact that we And this could be misguided, this could be incorrect, this could be where you say, well, I'm not in that cult. We believe humans have an option to do pretty well for themselves here. Like, this planet comes well endowed, and we have a lot of skills and technology amassed by now. Our inventory is pretty amazing, especially when you factor in aerospace. And so Bucky Fuller's concept was, let's get down to business with the housing, with all the leaky faucets, but more than that, people not having housing. And let's take another look in light of what we know how to do now in terms of what we're talking about doing on Mars or something. Like, artist conception of a Martian community might have actually some applications here on Earth. Like, I'm thinking particularly, and this was not offered in a Martian context, of Old Man River City. And that's also a good segue to the Noel Murphy films, because I was talking last episode about this gentleman, Noel Murphy, and his large inventory, his stash. You know, you can kind of see where he's going, where he's taking it with some of his older videos, in addition to the films and so forth. He's quite committed to teaching about Bucky Fuller. I mean, that's the signature pattern here. But you'll also get other influences. So he's a lot like me in that regard, right? So, like, this is just how we're similar more than how we're different in some ways. I recognize a lot of what he knows in my knowledge base. And there are a few of us enough. There's so few in this community that I'm talking about, the Bucky Fuller disciples, you're supposed to call them, that it's interesting, right, to cross paths. And we're going to maybe have Noel join us at the Trim Tab Book Club, where we're starting to read this book. We're starting to read, and this is going to tie it together for you. It's called Buckminster Fuller, Inc., Architecture in the Age of Radio. And you might be thinking, what does that have to do with Bucky, radio, and so on? Well, partly, he did want us to become more contemplative and give us time off, basically, from paying the mortgage. That's his whole intent. He had this idea of education automation, which just means we put a layer of automation under campus lifestyle at a minimum, right? So you enjoy what a student has today in a good place, right? You got a dorm, you got cafeteria, you got internet, you got books, you got intelligent people around you, and you've got opportunities to learn from them, often in a formal way, like through lectures or through videos or whatever. But just that whole idea of a global university as a metaphor for the planet itself, whether you're sitting in a lecture hall or driving a truck, it's instructive, it's entertaining. I mean, I've watched a lot of videos of truck drivers describing their lives and what's frustrating and what's cool and why they got into it in the first place. And of course, a lot of them got into it because they're looking for adventure. They want to see part of the world. And my truck drivers exchange program, I'll call it mine, I hope it's more than mine, is where we give drivers from all different countries opportunities to swap around, right? We negotiate on a basis of, if we're a big company, we can have our drivers move around and share driving duties in different parts of the world, right? Like we're UPS or DHL or one of those, maybe. Like, I don't need to name any particular companies, and it doesn't have to be practiced at the company level. It can be its own program and so forth. So the point being, we're back to the idea of, what do you learn when you're in your cab? And the idea of the trucker exchange is, well, probably quite a bit of data science. Probably quite a bit, not that you want to be squinting at SQL while you're trying to drive or whatever, structured query language. But you do want to, like, have continuity in your daily experience around, what you're learning at the university. And trucking is part of university level lifestyle, is what I'm saying. It's very a vital logistical skill, knowledge base, and it relates to geographical information systems, databases. It's part of computer science, routing, transportation engineering. All areas I've worked in, okay? Not like I'm a super expert. I'm not a truck driver. Wouldn't mind doing more of that myself. But forget about me again. We are looking at the Bucky Fuller syllabus and how we would teach it in a high school. And a high school could just mean it could be totally for adults. It's not like your age. It's just like we go through most subjects at a level where you're not too specialized yet, right? And so with object-oriented programming, for example, we might take a polyhedron. You see them concentric polyhedrons on your screen. That's a good place to start thinking about computer programming in terms of objects. And we can introduce the debates as we go. My belief when doing andragogy or pedagogy is that a shortcut into the vital core of any discipline is to find how it's polarized. How are people fighting? You know, what is the debate front line? Where are the equators? Where are the great circles? What are the spins, right? So with computers, or languages, let's say, there's a lot of spin around, do we want to use object-oriented programming or what's called functional programming? Should we not use one or the other? Is one or the other better? So there's all these what we call religious wars in some cases. But they have good, deep, points to be made on both sides in different ways. What is the function of programming? Why would we teach object-oriented programming? And of course here I'm using Python quite a bit, but not necessarily in the sense that an object-oriented programming person would in every case. Like these are just functions here for generating number sequences. And as you're plowing through this curriculum, you're developing, I would say, a healthy right brain or imagination for all kinds of sort of 3D CAD kind of stuff. So if your goal is to go into, say, from truck driving to animation or to game design where you're simulating trucking, right? Because there's a lot of games out there where you can basically be in a semi-realistic simulation of being on a route, right? In a made-up world, in the real world. Some of the coolest ones are of the real world. This is all part of your personal workspace in general systems theory. And we're looking at partially overlapping scenarios. We're looking at time tunnels. We're looking at Fuller's definition of universe as partially overlapping scenarios, right? Without any unitary sort of sudden picture of the universe itself. It's like we don't have that in his philosophy. Like a lot of philosophies, when they want to talk about the universe, they'll show you its picture. It looks like this. Here it is. Here's the universe. We don't need to do that with Fuller's definition. We don't need to have any one experience flash on or be the universe, because for one thing, we don't need words to gain meaning in that way. The way we develop our meaning around the word universe need not involve actually pointing to a thing and saying this here is the universe. We don't have to do that. We're not required to do that in order to use and refine our meaning around this word. So see, that was the kind of thing that would put you to sleep if you're not wide awake, doing something in the kitchen, driving, or whatever. It's kind of meditative, and it's the kind of thing you need in a podcast. Whereas in this particular video, I seem to be just kind of scrolling up and down inside of various documents. And if you're like in the process with me right now, if you're like that close of a student or teacher of mine, or whatever relationship that you're that synchronous, then you can maybe have some insight into that these were GitHub pages that were aimed in various directions, partly at helping the Buckminster Fuller Institute through a website redesign process, which I am not managing. I am just part of the team there. Lots of other projects of that nature. We'll tell you more about them. The Noel Murphy version 1.8, I called it, turned out to be the actual film that was shown on New Year's Eve. Check out my last New Year's Day. Check out my last video if you don't know what I'm talking about. And he may be joining us. We don't know for sure. I don't know anyway. Who knows the future, right? At the next meeting of our Trim Tab Book Club, where we are just now taking up um, this project, you could say starting it again, of getting design science into everyday vocabulary. And I think we've come a long way with a lot of our syllabus, thanks to 52 Thinking Ideas in New York and Thinking Society of Greater Philadelphia. Thanks for your help. So I'm going to let you get back to it. We'll see you on your next commute. Go Truckers.